Hello, thanks for joining us today. My name is Mark Sharp. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Red Bear Negotiations, and I'm glad you could be here with us today. All right, we're going to get started with today's session, a guide to strategic sourcing negotiations. In today's session, we're going to be covering procurement's evolving role in organizations from tactical to strategic, leveraging internal alignment for strategic advantage, managing supplier relationships to overcome chaos. And of course, we're going to answer questions at the end. Now, today's session is for both procurement and sales professionals. So please contribute questions as you can as they come through. So before we begin, this will be recorded and available for you after today's session is over. As I said, submit questions. There is a question area for you to submit questions during the presentation, and we'll be monitoring those as they come in. And then lastly, if you could, please complete the feedback survey once the session is over. Before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit about Red Bear, who we are and what we do. We're a global performance improvement firm dedicated to maximizing the profitability of the agreements negotiated with suppliers, customers, partners, and colleagues. We've got consultants who have delivered in over 15 different languages around the globe, and we've worked extensively in North and South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, and Australia. So what we do, our organization helps reduce costs, increase profitability, manage risk, increase internal alignment, and support achievement of critical corporate goals. Our proven approach helps our clients achieve the desired business results and a significant improvement in human performance. Our core programming is our situational negotiation skills workshop, which is for sales and cross-functional teams. Our negotiating with suppliers workshop, which is specially tailored for procurement professionals. And of course, we've got our cross-cultural negotiations program that is for a mixed audience, primarily in international negotiations. The way that we do this, some of our all of our workshops are custom tailored. We work with clients to design client-specific real-world skills exercises, as well as deliver that in a discovery-based learning model, which helps participants test their existing skills and apply their new techniques in real-world scenarios. Today, I'm joined with Shawn Malone. Shawn started his career as a U.S. Army officer and later taught chemistry at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Shawn transitioned to the corporate world, where he had a successful career as a sourcing and supply chain leader with 22 years of global sourcing, logistics, and supplier quality experience at GE Appliances and restaurant supply chain solutions. Now, Shawn shares his sourcing expertise and experiences with clients to improve profitability throughout the supply chain. Shawn, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Mark, thanks. Great to be here.
So if you could, as I mentioned, you were recently employed as a procurement professional, and now you've worked with us here at Red Bear. Tell us a little bit about how your philosophy or how Red Bear's philosophy speaks to you.
Yeah. So about 8 years ago or so, when I was at GE Appliances, we brought Red Bear in to give negotiation courses to our team. And there was about 130 of us we had to all do. And, what was great was one thing that we, I think really worked well with Red Bear was your philosophy. You come in and you tailor your actual negotiation classes specific to the business you're dealing with. You look at specific cases that we're dealing currently with and help each one of those individuals work through those. And so a lot of the techniques, the skills and everything that that we teach at Red Bear align very closely the way I did it as well. So that was pretty exciting for me when I decided to move out of the corporate world into more of the consultant world, was to actually take those principles and skills and go forward and help others.
That's great. So why don't we jump in today's session? So if you could get us started by talking about what exactly is considered strategic sourcing.
So a lot of people look at strategic sourcing maybe different ways, but strategic sourcing is just a process. And the process in many companies, it could be a 6, 7, 8-step process. But what I'd like to show you here is basically what I like to look at. I'm sure everyone can see this slide here now. But you look at strategic versus tactical. So let's like, as a tactical sourcing person, your job is basically to send out RFQs and maybe negotiate or select suppliers. And that's really where the tactical side is. And when you look at strategic, there's a lot more homework that needs to occur before any of that occurs. And that's so you see on this slide here in strategic planning, you really spend a lot of time understanding your category, look at the spend within your business. And then you take a lot of time looking at the supply market. Who are the suppliers out there? Who are the competitors? And all those sort of things, so you understand what your supply base looks like. And then at that time, you start developing a procurement strategy. Now, we're going to talk a lot about how developing that strategy involves both your internal business and have an internal alignment, as well as working with your suppliers. Then the execution piece of the strategic is doing the RFQ and negotiating and so forth. But then once again, the strategy part is how you implement it and integrate that sourcing plan into your business as it goes along. It's pretty dynamic. It may change. You may be working with your supplier and they may come back and help you look at ways to innovate that product. All those sort of things are tied into this execution phase. And lastly, but not least, of course, is tracking those suppliers, holding them accountable. Are they meeting the cost, the quality, the delivery, the sustainability requirements that you had set in your strategy? So this total piece is what strategic sourcing is. And so that's so you'll find that this kind of varies among many different businesses.
That's great. Why don't we take a moment to check in with our audience with our first poll question? So I'm going to go ahead and put that on for us and open this up for the group. So this poll will run for a little over a minute. And so what the question is what is procurement's role in your organization? Is it tactical? Is it strategic? Or is it a mixture, a hybrid, if you will? Again, Shawn, you had kind of made the comment that this is something that some of these groups might be evolving or might have both of these. And so it'll be interesting to see what the audience begins to let us know. We're going to start seeing results come in pretty soon on that.
So yeah, what you're going to see is that, I mean, you see a lot of different things. You see some companies that they require their purchasing professionals to be strategic. They'll handle both the planning and the execution side. Others, they may be actually a hybrid. They may have a group of purchasing folks that are just responsible for the purchase and maybe even the supply chain responsibilities of executing, getting that product to the business. Then you've got then some sort of between. You may have some people working both. They have a centralized team, but with individual members at the plants or wherever their services are at that are managing kind of the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. It looks like final numbers are about 66% are reporting using a hybrid model, with 33% reporting that they have a strategic alignment. So that's some interesting numbers for us.
Well, that's actually, and that's good, because the fact that they're less tactical is showing the role of procurement being more ingrained into these businesses and relying on them just more than just procuring goods for them. But the key elements I want to remember to highlight is to be successful in strategic sourcing. I see there's kind of two key elements that I see. It's getting both internal alignment and then managing supplier relationships.
Yeah, that's great. So what does the evolution of this role, how does that impact goals and goal setting for the organization?
No, that's a great question. So typical sourcing goals have always been kind of the cost, the delivery quality. Others, you see sustainability now being a big one out there, maybe even innovation. But we often find that sourcing goals conflict with overall business goals, or maybe vice versa. The business goals may conflict with sourcing, who's focused mainly on cost. And so when you talk about the evolution of strategic sourcing, that's why I said in the beginning about this internal alignment. When you start getting that before you start developing your sourcing strategy, you start to understand what's important to the business. For instance, delivery in today's world, right? With the pandemic, people are having more difficulties getting their goods on time and the quantities they want. So delivery may be more important to the business now than it was in the past. So faster delivery could impact cost. And of course, sourcing always wants the best cost, but when you talk about strategic sourcing, it's all about total cost and having product delivered on time when you need it to produce it out the door. I mean, that's obviously very important. Many times production, you can't shut down production. They may be missing parts or short of parts. And so sourcing may have to go out and spend extra money on delivery to get the part on time so production can meet it. So in terms of as an overall tying into the business and getting alignment, making sure they understand what's most important during that. And so you can see goals and goal setting is nowadays has been very challenging. So when you look at strategic sourcing, it forces the leadership basically to look at ways of aligning to a total business result. So in other words, is the business one to accept a higher cost but get better quality, better innovation, better delivery, right? So this is where you need to make sure your goals are tied to business growth or margin improvement, maybe then more than just very specific ones.
That's great. So in strategic sourcing, you mentioned that those two key elements of driving that internal alignment and also managing the supplier relationships. Why don't we explore driving internal alignment and when and how does this alignment happen?
So, the alignment, it obviously needs to be done very early in the process before goals are set for maybe the following year, right? So, many businesses do this different ways. At GE, we had a process, it was called Hoshin, but it basically allowed it was a kind of a flow down. The top business determined what its goals were and it flowed down. And you looked at ways to meet each one of those goals as a total team. So let's go back to the slide here and let's talk about internal alignment. So in the process here, so if we look at kind of the strategic sourcing, the process map here. So for instance, getting internal alignment on analyzing the supply market. So you may have gone out and determined that there's kind of 3 good suppliers. But there may be reasoning why the business may want to focus on one versus the other and getting alignment. And when I mean alignment, it's been getting kind of an agreement on, hey, maybe this is the supplier we focus on as our primary path because it's better overall for the business. That's getting aligned. So sourcing sometimes may be so focused on a particular supplier because it's going to help them reach their cost goal, but the total business goals is what matters. And so when you're developing this procurement strategy, then it needs to tie in the overall business goals. That's where the internal alignment needs to happen. And at the same time, when you look at kind of the execution piece, the benchmarking and tracking our supplier, that's making sure you're aligned on what the business is important to the business. As I mentioned several times, sustainability may be a business goal. And so you need to get an internal alignment with the business on which suppliers we want to focus on to meet those sustainability goals.
So why is it that internal alignment becomes so critical and sometimes so difficult to achieve?
Well, it's difficult. So first of all, let's look at there's always conflicts, right? And within the businesses in different departments. So here's a classic example is like, let's say your engineering group. Your business, your engineering team may be responsible for providing the resources to qualify new suppliers, or So this is a chance then for sourcing and engineering to get aligned, because often engineering may have in their mind a certain supplier they want to go to because they understand that supplier may get them the technology that they need to meet, that technology going to help meet their solutions. And sourcing, I think, and getting alignment with engineering is understanding why they want to go supplier. Maybe engineering is not aware of other suppliers, and that's why it's important to meet between the two and go through. When you analyze your supply market, you can bring that to engineering and talk through those suppliers that actually may meet their needs. We talk a lot in Red Bear about needs versus wants, where a want is very specific. There's only one way to meet it. Whereas needs, if you understand what their need is, there's many different ways to meet that need. So that's why it's difficult, because sometimes we don't quite understand what the need is of the other side. We focus on what they're wanting, but not necessarily their underlying need. So once again, these meetings need to take place, usually prior to the early goal setting, and that's part of developing that procurement strategy. And part of it is it's in businesses, you're always lacking time and resources as well. So sourcing always has an opportunity maybe to have a new supplier on board in the business. Like, we don't have time, we got to get this product. And this is where aligning early and putting in a process, maybe you can start introducing that supplier during the process so that you do have the ability to build it into the plan. And like anything, sourcing and the business overall, they got to kind of look and see where the concessions are. We may have to concede on a particular supplier in order to meet a different business goal. So it's also part of that strategic planning is kind of also planning concession as a concession strategy internally. Believe it or not, we negotiate internally, and the same principles at Red Bear apply when we negotiate internally as we do externally as well.
It seems as though in order to get that alignment too, part of that internal negotiation is just trying to get folks to communicate. I imagine sometimes that's a cultural issue, and sometimes it's not so much that there's a open resistance to working together. It's just that there may be silos where different parties may not work together. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. And this is one of I think in businesses, this is one of their big major leaps become truly strategic, is communicating as a total business and getting everybody in the same room. I mean, listen, in the age of this, pandemic, and more people are meeting on Zoom, and, it's actually, it makes things actually sometimes a little more difficult. But it also too, it can make things easier because you actually have dedicated time for a Zoom meeting and you're there. But like I always say, is negotiations, frankly, you'll see a drop off in performance between email and phone versus face to face. And even on Zoom now, I find a lot of people during Zoom meetings, they keep their video off. So you still lack that face-to-face interaction, which is getting internal alignment, frankly, is important, because we had Jason, one of our former Red Bear consultants, give a talk on tension, and tension's very important part of these discussions, and so managing that tension is important, and having the screens on. But definitely, I see a question here. So over here, it may tie to what you were just talking about. And the question was, any advice for dealing with operational organizations who base their entire operational strategy around sourcing results rather than allowing sourcing to base their strategy around the operational strategy? So, I mean, this is just what we were talking about, right? It's a challenging environment, because what a lot of businesses do is they throw out a number and say, this is what we need in terms of our cost outsourcing. I think this is probably what this person's maybe alluding to. They're saying, hey, okay, our operational strategy is we need 5 million out of sourcing, right? And so we've seen that progression as well in other organizations. And sometimes how they handle it is that they look at it and they say, okay, we understand you need 5 million. Here's the current environment. When you look through the strategic sourcing process, here's the environment, here's where we're at, here's our alternatives. And really kind of coming back and say, what is your true need behind the 5 million? You want to be more competitive. How are there ways to make you more competitive? It could be innovative, that allows you to maybe get more cost for your product versus taking cost out. So these are sort of, so when I say advice, those are some ways to approach it, is instead of looking at what their true need is. When I talk about underlying need, and we discuss this a lot in Red Bear negotiations, that's a good way to get to that, allowing you to base your strategy around their op results.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like that really underscores too another component of Red Bear's philosophy, which is just asking those questions and getting to, really driving into those needs and asking the other party what it is that either they're looking for or concerned with, and getting that conversation going to uncover more information.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, listen, internal alignment's critical. It's not easy. If it was easy, obviously everyone would be doing it a lot better, but it does give you a strategic advantage though. When you're internally aligned, it allows you to respond quicker to market challenges. You set a plan. Once you set a plan, it goes out the window the minute the year starts, because you have the market doesn't respond to how we like it always to. So at the end of the day, by having this alignment, you can meet and say, okay, where was our alternatives? What did we have set into our plan if this happened? And you can respond to those challenges. And those regular meetings, it doesn't just happen prior to goal setting. You do these on monthly basis because things change, and it can eliminate or minimize competing priorities. Listen, I've been in meetings where Sorensen said, listen, you're going to have to take a cost increase to get this here, but we can take advantage of this business. We can bring this new model on to market quicker, even though there may be cost increases, and we get a competitive advantage. We'll drive margin improvement. Well, if margin improvement is one of my metrics overall, because I'm aligned with the business, that's what we want. And I think, and that's sometimes the tough barrier that we face in businesses, that they silo everyone, and it creates that. When you silo everyone, it creates them not to think of creative ideas to improve the overall business results.
Right. Why don't we take another minute to check in with our audience? Why don't we run with our second poll question? I'll go ahead and get this opened up. So how well are you aligned internally? Are you very well aligned? Are you so aligned where it could be better, or are you not very well aligned at all? I think that this is a critically important point, as you said, is that if everyone is singing from the same song sheet, if you will, then it does make dealing with issues and a lot easier. But if not, there's battles that need to be fought, or just a lack of information flowing through the organization, and so it can really add another layer of tension to critical business operations.
Absolutely. I'd be interested to see what the group here responds to as far as how well they're aligned. I would say it's going to be along the lines of not very well aligned, or so could be better, but I might be surprised, because this is one of the biggest complaints I think most sourcing organizations have is they wish the business would understand them better, right? That they wish they understood their the market better, and how well they could align and move faster on other supplier changes, let's say.
Yeah, so it looks like I went ahead and closed the poll. It looks like we've got 60% of our audience said so and could be better. That seems like there's always room for improvement, right? And then we had 20% very well aligned, and another 20% not very well aligned at all. So at least that bell curve, kind of looks intact, but we've got some folks in the audience that maybe are enjoying the high life of a well unified organization, and some that are maybe a little bit more frustrated than others.
I mean, and it's just a reflection of the type of businesses that are out there. Between, I mean, a lot of people say, well, I'm in a small organization, so it's tougher for us. Frankly, I think it's always tougher when you're in a larger organization, but the smaller, normally the problem is because everyone's doing more jobs in a larger business, right? They're spread out. but a lot of smaller businesses are a lot more aligned because they're a little more quick, a little more flexible, and easier to respond to the market as a team.
So what are some best practices that folks can use to maintain or to try and build some internal alignment, especially in their role coming from procurement? What are some of the best practices they can employ?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I mean, you got to go in the mindset that in meeting with these leaders that you're focused on the total business goals, right? And then once they understand that, then is really kind of understanding is that you may lay out a roadmap for them and say, here's how I think this is going to support these goals. Where do you think we can align here and talk about which one of these you can best support, right? You know, I will tell you that getting these alignment meetings, especially with people's time and everything, is very difficult. So having some sort of weekly, monthly, quarterly rhythm is important. And frankly, once you get aligned as well, it makes your negotiations with your suppliers go much, much better.
That's great. So now that we've talked about internal alignment and how important that is, why don't we switch and talk a little bit about supplier relationships and managing those, and how does that fit into the strategic sourcing process?
Right. So, it's getting that internal alignment obviously is the one piece of that sourcing process, strategic sourcing process. The managing supplier relationships. So, like I said, once you're aligned, once you know what your alternate is, like a lot of people always tell me, they go in a negotiation that, they say, well, what's my walk away? Well, your walk away, what your walk away is way before you've started negotiations, because that was part of that procurement strategy and getting internal alignment and getting business, everyone aligned on what would cause you to go to a new supplier. At the same time, that during those developing that procurement strategy, it tells you which suppliers you need to focus on, and how do you know which suppliers to focus on? Well, let's go back to the graphic again. I don't know if you have that available. Let me see if I got it here. So in that early, when you profile the category and analyze the spend, part of that has to do with how do you segment your supply base? Are you going to be focusing on all of them? You're not going to, if you've got 100 some suppliers, they can't all be strategic. And so categorizing your suppliers into, you may have them called strategic suppliers, where the ones that are most strategic, they may be a sole supplier. Their product is most critical to your operations. They have innovation that may be an innovation roadmap that's tied directly to your business. And then you may have that kind of maybe those preferred suppliers where you have single source sort of relationships, but you have the ability to move around. And then of course you got the commoditized. So once you understand and categorize, then you kind of know how to manage your suppliers and which ones you need to develop deeper relationships within. So as you move forward in negotiation. So that's kind of where that managing supplier relationships is. It allows you to evaluate and negotiate with these suppliers. Because you've already categorized, and that's important in the strategic sourcing process. One of the things that we miss out on in businesses, in our business, they're always saying we need more innovation, we need to be first to market. Well, if you're a kind of a product-based type business, your suppliers in many cases are I would say are most responsible for bringing innovation to the table. And if you set these relationships up properly, they have trust in you to be bringing you that innovation, and they look at ways to bring, and that's innovation, whether it's efficiencies, alternative technology, different ways to present it to the line, all different things of innovation. So it can be on services as well. Most of my side has been more direct, so I like to focus more on the product side. But at the end of the day, managing the supplier relationships also then helps hold your suppliers accountable, and by measuring them, and having quarterly leadership meetings with these suppliers helps reinforce your business goals that you set, the benchmarking and tracking that you set early, being able to categorize those and determine which ones you want to meet with. And I will tell you at G Appliances, we had, out of 100 and some suppliers, we had basically 9 strategic suppliers that we met with quarterly, and it was a leadership meeting with leaders. And you would be surprised how many of the supplier leaders wanted to see how they were performing, how they were being scored, and they would hold their people accountable because they wanted to improve their score. So managing those relationships is very, very important in your overall negotiations, because part of that process, it makes sense. So your suppliers know what's going on.
So I would think then, as you're describing this and having those meetings with strategic suppliers and a scorecard, that could add some tension to the relationship. How is it that you manage then the tension that comes up in a very strategic approach to supplier relationship management?
So as we teach in Red Bear, tension is a key component of negotiations, and we want it. It's good. It's actually, tension is positive. We create tension by protecting our self-interest and making demands and different things that allow us to drive that tension. The key thing here is it needs to be healthy tension. Healthy tension only occurs when you've established good supplier relationships. And the reason I say healthy tension, if there's no relationship, think about it. I can create tension without a relationship, and the other side, they're either gonna, fight or flight is kind of usually how it works, right? Because they have nothing to lose if they leave in a sense, right? But if you have a good collaborative relationship and you're creating the tension by asking to protect your self-interest and making demands of them, because of that relationship, they're gonna find a way to get to a creative agreement. And that's why in strategic sourcing, I always say that you developing those relationships and the suppliers and internally, frankly, but with suppliers is important, because you will not get the healthy tension you need during negotiations.
It really sounds too like there's a premium on providing value as a salesperson, and that from a procurement standpoint, you need to be thinking about total cost. So you need to be thinking about something more than just price. And then for the sales side of things, is that you need to, in order to really stand out from your competitors, not only is cost a component, but also just overall value is important as well. And so knowing that, I would think helps to really dive into that healthy tension. Is that, okay, let's figure this out. Let's maintain our own self-interest, but then we know we've got to collaborate to kind of get to that overall idea of value.
Right. And frankly, on the sales folks, they, at the end, they should be asking questions. We call that managing information, and Red Bear is one of the principles. And managing information is truly finding what's important to the other side. What's important to the sourcing professional? Okay, they may say they want a 5% reduction. Okay, that's a want. There's only one way to meet it. You got to give them a 5% reduction. But if they dig and ask those questions and find out what's behind that 5%, what's the underlying need? Well, they need to be competitive. Well, they've got a promotion going on. Well, then there's lots of different ways to meet a need of making them competitive. Maybe it's a promotional period during a time for, maybe reducing the price during that promotional period, right? That meets the need. So that's why I think, and for sales folks, we don't see, both sides, frankly, sometimes don't focus on what the underlying need is. We focus on price too much. And frankly, in this environment where price is actually getting tougher to negotiate just because of the supply chain world and disruptions, there's lots of other things to negotiate. There's lots of alternate negotiables. And unless you understand the need of the other side, you'll never get to those alternate negotiables.
I would imagine as you begin to have those conversations with suppliers and you're asking all the those questions, getting into that information, that it becomes a little bit difficult to store all of that and to retain all of that and leverage it for for uses. That might be a good segue to our next poll question, which is, are you using a supplier relationship management system in your organization? Talk to us a little bit about the importance of a supplier relationship management system.
So supplier relationship management is once again, it ties into the strategic sourcing process. So in a supplier relationship management, one, you're categorizing your suppliers, and one, then once you categorize them, then you're developing some sort of maybe let's call it a scoring template. How do you score them? How do you measure them? And then meeting on a regular basis and doing that on a regular schedule. And so that's generally a supplier relationship management type system. And even though you can have a supplier relationship management, you may not necessarily have a very good supplier relationship. So I've seen people that just measure the suppliers and that's it, and it stops there. But it's important that the leaders get together from both sides and really talk through what they're being measured on, how they can improve, and develop that relationship. Because once that relationship is developed, you can be more collaborative in your negotiations. Never sacrificing your business self-interest, but you can now start being more collaborative and get to those creative type agreements.
So it looks like ending up on the poll, it looks like 100% of the audience is not using that supplier relationship management system. So that's something that maybe perhaps folks want to look into a little bit.
Yeah, and this could be, and maybe people, when they think of an SRM, they think maybe more of a, are they thinking that it's more of a software type driven system? And this could be both formal and informal supplier relationship management. But if you're not categorizing your suppliers and measuring them and meeting them on a regular basis based on their category, you're missing out on a lot. And it's not surprising I see that here, because a lot of organizations try to implement it. But if you're not internally aligned and getting your leaders and this is not just sourcing leaders who are meeting with suppliers, it's getting your product teams, your engineering, your quality leaders together in a room. And in this day and age, getting them in a room or on a Zoom call or whatever it is that you do together with a supplier it gets more and more difficult. And I will tell you that having a good SRM, getting through these supply disruptions is even more important to petition your business why you should have an SRM. A lot of this, having an SRM type process would have identified a lot of these things up front, maybe had started working on alternatives. But I bet you, imagine a lot of people on this call, it's been a lot of firefighting. How do I get this? How do I get more? How do I get it delivered sooner? With all the, how do I get it offloaded to ships and on the West Coast, all those sort of things. And having SRM, they're probably on a regular quarterly basis, you probably would have started seeing that develop and started talking then about the things that you can control versus the things you can't control. And I think you're probably going to, discuss, we were going to talk about chaos, I think, some point in this discussion.
Yeah. Actually, I was curious about that. And I just wanted to kind of share that we saw some feedback on that while the SRM might, as you said, might be confused with a software solution, it can be a software solution, but as much as an offline solution too, of just, structuring and segmenting your suppliers into buckets and kind of understanding who's strategic and who's, playing a different role for you. So, but yeah, I was curious, when we talk about the internal alignment and the supplier relationship management, as you said, over the past year, I'm sure with a lot of folks putting out fires, how do you take care of those two components to leverage that for, strength in times of chaos?
So let's talk about chaos, right? It's we've had a lot of disruption. People product as far as receiving goods or services. It's taken longer, or even the scarcity of the chaos of not getting enough. We know there's been a lot of chaos for inflation. And then with all that said, there's rushing to get more product as soon as you can could lead to quality issues and rejects and so forth. So this is what we talk when we talk chaos, right? There's lots of chaos going on. And I've always said there's things you can control and things you can't control, right? You can't control inflation. You can't control sometimes the disruption that's going on now with a lot of goods, being tied up maybe on ships and so forth. But you can manage cost controls over inflation and deflation. So if you build that in when you're developing your supply relationships and your contracts and talking about, well, we understand there's going to be inflation, but how do we control it? Do we limit how much we can jump each quarter? You can manage that. You can build structure around that. You can build structure around delivery. You may say, hey, if there's a delivery disruption, that I get at least 75% of my requirements. So there's ways to manage it. You can't control it, but you can manage it. And so I think those companies that are doing the best right now in these, I would say, difficult times in terms of cost and delivery are the ones that probably have some of the better supplier relationships. And they are the key difference, I would say, because when you look at supplier relationship, it's funny. I've seen this in many different companies. When times are good on the company side, when deflation's happening, we seem to get everything we want. We're happy. And then when it goes the other way, we don't like it to go that way. So it's a two-way street. And if it's only advantageous for you during the good times, but it's not advantageous the other way, that's not a very good supplier relationship. So in order to manage these other costs, that's where the internal alignment comes from. Them understand that, hey, there is inflation, but this is let's get aligned on how we're going to manage that. So once again, it all comes back to the strategic planning. We talked about segmenting your suppliers and your strategic suppliers, getting alignment on which ones are strategic. So the question really is, what makes the supplier strategic? Are they sole source? They provide a critical component, key innovation. I talked about these earlier, and meeting with them on a quarterly basis and looking at ways, not just on cost, quality, delivery, but on things, on disruptions, supply chain disruption. What do we do when this happens? We used to call them business continuity plans, and a lot of times, if you don't have those ready, then it's an uphill battle. And then those businesses that are doing those and meeting with the suppliers and talking about those topics are probably the ones that are most likely getting taken care of today.
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of businesses that have looked over the past year and in all the different ways that they've been impacted, if they're not turning that into a strategic planning, to think if anything were to ever happen again, we need to have plan A, plan B, plan C, yep, plan D. That contingency planning is such a huge part of strategic planning. And really it's not what should we do when we're in this situation. It's this is what we're going to do when we find ourselves in that situation.
Yep. And I saw someone here, they said, do you have a structured governance model you're using during SRM, like an MBR, QBR, EBR? So in the businesses I was in, they did have, they had very strict, QBR. They had meetings on a quarterly business leadership. And when they say a structured governance model, not sure 100% what they mean by a structured governance model, but the business I've been had a structured QBR. They went in, they had, 9 areas they wanted to discuss, and, whether it had to do with meeting cost out goals, delivery, innovation, customer service, those sort of items. And that was kind of, we built a governance and then a regular, if they scored red, let's say in a category, the governance around that they'd have to correct that within a certain amount of time or come back with a response on how they were going to respond, fix that. So there's very strict guidelines on that. Someone else said, what do you think should we base supplier segmentation as an SRM? Is a lot depending on the segmentation done. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're not, if you segment a supplier and they're kind of a commodity type supplier, you're not going to have you're not going to really have a true SRM process with a commoditized based supplier. If there's 5 or 6 suppliers out there that you can turn to anytime for that service or for that product, there's probably not a lot of necessarily relationship management that you have to do. So it does, segmentation definitely determines how you treat your SRM and likewise your QBR process. And we did QBRs with strategic suppliers, kind of the preferred suppliers. There was some, depending, we would have, kind of annual or maybe, twice a year meetings with them, discuss their overall, their business.
So we've got a couple more questions that have popped up. One of them has to do with they're using a single source supplier, but they don't want to risk moving to a lower cost. Do you have, what's been your experience? Do you have any advice for how to move forward in a situation like that?
Yeah, so this is always, even when I do supplier negotiations with all our businesses, this always seems to come up, right? We've got a single source supplier, and it's a lot of risk to us having a single source, but not, it's the risk actually to them is moving to a lower cost solution because everyone likes the current supplier, but they're high cost. The business wants to drive cost out, but the business thinks there's too much risk moving to a lower cost solution. So my experience has normally been is, okay, define what the risks are moving to a lower cost solution. Remember, we said there's, the business may want something and they feel like, that particular supplier, they're not going to get that. But you need to understand what is their underlying need? What is their underlying need, what they want to make sure they're confident of the new supplier, and then making sure you gather that info. So let's say they say, well, this supplier doesn't have the innovation that our current supplier has. Well, that's anecdotal, right? So your job as a source person would be then to understand that's their need. If that's their concern, then that's what you should be targeting on what this lower cost supplier is helping find out if they can meet the need of your team, of your business. So that's my experience, is always understand why they think there's a risk, and then mitigate those risks. And that's what all of us as sourcing professionals should be doing. And we're always looking at mitigating risk and finding those reasons. So that's kind of my experience would be to understand the underlying need of why they think it's a risk, and then work towards ways to mitigate those risks, and so that they become more and more confident with a new supplier.
That's great. So that kind of wraps up the questions that we've had, and I appreciate you going through and really honing in on why internal alignment and supplier management, relationship management is so important, and how it can help us move through chaos. And again, those best practices, it really comes down to planning, strategic planning, as well as planning for negotiables, and really asking questions to drive to those needs. Anything else that you want to leave us with?
No, I just want to plug Red Bear here. I mean, frankly, we talked about internal alignment and managed supplier relationships in the strategic sourcing side, and Red Bear, obviously, when you think about internal alignment, it's really, at the end of the day, it becomes an internal negotiation. And the principles that Red Bear teaches, and the model of getting to creative agreements between, balancing that tension between competitive and collaborative type negotiations. Learning those techniques works both internally and then obviously with the suppliers. So that's why I think, as Red Bear, having that background and that experience, and at Red Bear, we just don't teach it, right? what's the main thing we're known for is we actually practice it, and we have people practice it, and so they become more comfortable. And so so that's why I think Red Bear helps a lot in this internal alignment, because it deals with a lot of internal negotiating. And then the same thing goes for managing supplier relationships. If you manage it properly and you create that relationship, you can create healthy tension during negotiations to get them to get them to hopefully do what your business needs and based on what you're aligned with. So I think if anyone has doubts on, if they feel uncomfortable with internal alignment and supplier relationships, I highly recommend the Red Bear course, because it'll teach you some great techniques to help get there.
Great. Thanks, Shawn. I appreciate that. So one thing to leave you with too is that in the attachments area of today's webinar, we've included links to 2 white papers. So if you're interested in learning more about supplier negotiations, you can download our supplier negotiations white paper and learn more about what we've talked about here today. And then if you're also interested in learning more about Red Bear's 6 guiding principles of negotiation, we have our negotiating profitable agreements white paper that you can download as well. Also visit our website, follow our page on LinkedIn, and also if you would like to connect with Shawn on LinkedIn. So again, Shawn, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today, and appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing everyone else again in our next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Mark.